This video is about percent and percentages. Let's first look at the word percent. Percent. Per means for every, and cent is reference to 100. Like a cent is 1/100th of a dollar, or 100 pennies makes a dollar, or a century is 100 years. Cent is 100. So per cent literally means for every 100. And that's what we mean when we talk about a percentage. A percentage means how many out of 100. If I have 100 of these, 25 would be such and such, or 25%. And this can be set up as a simple proportion. AB equals P over 100, where A is some part of a thing, B is the base, or the whole number of things, and P is the percent. Using this proportion, we can solve for any part of things, any base, or any percentage based on filling in the other three unknowns. So let's look at this in practice. Here we have a fairly common question. What percent of 50 is 25? Now, many of you probably know this right off the top, but let's look at how we can use our proportion to solve this issue. So we want to start filling in what we know. In this case, 25 is A. That's our part. 50 is our base, or B. So what we don't know is what percent. We don't know our P. So if we have 25 over 50, we don't know P, but we do know it's always out of 100. That's how we would set up our proportion. And then we could use a cross product, or however you want to solve it, figuring 2,500 or 2,500 divided by 50, therefore, equals P, and P equals 50. Therefore, 25 is 50% of 50. We aren't always going to be looking for the percentage, though. Sometimes we're going to need to find the part or the base. Here's another kind of problem that comes up. A pair of shoes that normally cost $38.50 is on sale for 30% off. What is the sale price? So the first thing we need to figure out is what's 30% of $38.50? So in this case, here's our base right here. And here's our percentage. Okay, so we start filling out our equation, and we realize what we don't know in this case is A. We don't know our part. We don't know what 30% of 38.50 is. So we set up our proportion this way. And again, you can sort of do a cross product here and do 30 times 38, 50. And we divide that by 100, and we should get A, which is 1155. But that's not the answer to the question, believe it or not. That's just the first step in finding the answer to this question. What we've found is what 30% of 38.50 is, but we want to find the sale price, which means we're taking 30% off, and 30% is 1155, so we want to take 1155 off of the original price. In that case, we have to do this subtraction. 38.50 minus that 30% we want to take off, which is 1155, leaves us with a sale price of $26.95. So in this case, the proportion that we used to solve for percentages was the first step in the problem. Make sure with all things that you're always answering the question being asked. So when a test comes up, make sure you reread the problem and check to make sure that you're answering that question. In this case, the first step was using the proportion. The second step was actually doing the subtraction so that we could get the final answer. Here's another form of these kinds of questions, and the one iteration we haven't really talked about yet, which is looking for the base. So this question says 125% of what number is 1750? In this case, we have the part, and we have the percentage, and now we're looking for the base. So we would set it up as 17.5 over B equals 125 over 100. And again, we would do our cross product, although in this case it's going to look a little different. Remember, we want to multiply these two things and these two things. So let's walk through this one step by step. So I'm going to rewrite this as 17.5 times 100 is equal to 125 times b. And then what I'm going to do is, to get b by itself, to isolate the variable, I'm going to divide both sides by 125. Therefore, b equals 14. So 125% of 14 is 17.5, and that's our base. Calculating interest is a common way that you'll see percentage come up in math. So one of the things you're going to want to know is what we call the simple interest formula, which means that the interest that you gain on an investment is equal to the principal, the initial amount you invest, times the rate you get, percentage of interest increasing, times the amount of time it spends in that investment. Now, this is interesting and useful on a very limited scale because it's simple interest. And most things aren't done by simple interest. Most things are done by compounded interest, which we'll talk about later. But I just want you to be familiar with this so that if it comes up, you can recognize it. Interest is equal to principal times rate times time. So, if you invested $50 at a rate of 3.5% per year for 3 years, the interest you would earn is represented as I, interest you would earn, equals 50, principal you've invested. The rate, now I wrote 3.5%, which if we represent it as a decimal would be 0.035 times time, which in this case is 3 years. And if we simplified that, we'd figure out that was $5.25.